Oh, what a night. So calm and peaceful. Just look at those stars, Reg. Yeah, the stars are great. I just wish the moon was out there. It's so dark without it that I can't see beyond my nose. Gosh, it's so cold here. Hey, Reg, look, what's that straight ahead of us? Oh my lord, it's an iceberg and it's so close. Ring the bell, Freddy, ring it. On a calm moonless night of April 14th, 1912, the passenger ocean liner, Titanic, hit an iceberg on her maiden voyage. From Southampton to New York City, over 1,500 lives were lost, making the sinking of the Titanic the third deadliest shipwreck in maritime history. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Titanic disaster and how and why she really sank. The construction of the Titanic started in March of 1909, 3 years before her maiden voyage. That same year, while 14,000 men were working on the Titanic in Belfast docks, Mother Nature gave birth to the notorious iceberg that was destined to send the unsinkable ship to the bottom of the ocean. Each year, approximately 40,000 icebergs, big and small, are born along the coast of Greenland. They initially float north along Greenland's west coast, and then begin their southward journey, past the coastlines of Baffin Island, Labrador, and Newfoundland. Most of the icebergs never reach the shipping routes of the Atlantic, though. They either get caught en route or melt in the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. But our iceberg was special. It withstood all the hardships, and after a 3-year-long journey, it finally reached the area where in April of 1912, it would meet the unsinkable Titanic. Let's talk a little bit about the Titanic's design and why she was nicknamed the Unsinkable. Well, the press had heard that the Titanic was built with 16 watertight compartments, and that she could stay afloat with up to 4 of those compartments flooded. It also heard about her 8 pumps that could suck out up to 30 tons of water per minute. How exciting! These and other advancements, like double bottom, led the press to claim the ship was indeed unsinkable. But here's what the press didn't know. The Titanic's watertight compartments were actually far from being watertight. See, to be truly watertight, a compartment must form a box or cube within the hull. But what the Titanic really had were 15 bulkheads and a handful of watertight doors. Those bulkheads were not much higher than the waterline, so they didn't really prevent the water from overflowing through the top. Now, let's talk about the pumps. While they could help deal with the consequences of a small hull breach, they couldn't keep the ship above water. In case of a somewhat serious one, they merely didn't have enough power. Now, back to the maiden voyage. For 4 days it was a perfect one. The passengers were enjoying the calm weather and perfect service. But calm weather and still water were camouflaging the hidden dangers of the seas. Mr. Murdoch. Captain, sir. Well, Mr. Murdoch, tell the lookouts to keep their eyes wide open. We're approaching the region from where numerous ships have sent us ice warnings. You know what this means, Mr. Murdoch. Mr. Murdoch, yes, Captain. Located on the foremast, 90 feet above the waterline. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are the lookouts on duty. It's their job to maintain a continuous watch of the sea and alert the bridge on any kind of visible hazard. That night, detecting icebergs was their main priority. A windless and moonless night in the ice-heavy region is a nightmare for the lookouts. Without the wind, there are no waves crashing on the icebergs that they could see or hear. Without the moon, they can't see far enough. But more importantly, there are no reflections from the icebergs that they could spot. They also didn't have binoculars with them, which is odd. While the lookouts usually use the naked eye to spot objects, they also use binoculars to confirm and enable an enhanced picture of the objects. So even if they had the binoculars, that would not have helped Fleet and Lee detect hazards. Like icebergs earlier. At around midnight on April 14th, the Titanic was going at the top speed of 22 knots. Even though the captain wisely adjusted the course to go further down south with the idea to avoid areas known to have ice. At such high speed, with such poor visibility, they were playing with fire. Or perhaps we should say, playing with ice. At 11:39, Fleet and Lee spotted the iceberg. Just 900 feet from them. Iceberg straight ahead. On the bridge, First Officer Murdoch reacted lightning fast. He ordered the ship to execute a port-around maneuver and stop the engines to reduce the speed. His plan was good, but he simply didn't have enough time. The Titanic was going way too fast. While Murdoch was able to avoid the head-on collision, the Titanic struck the iceberg on the starboard side, just 36 seconds after it was spotted by the lookouts. 5 compartments were breached, and she started taking in water fast, at the rate of 400 tons a minute. The pumps were only able to deal with 30 tons of water per minute. From that moment, nothing could have saved the Titanic. The unsinkable ship was indeed sinking. Wait a minute. The Titanic's hull was made of 1-inch thick steel plates. How in the world could a chunk of ice have breached it so easily? Well, the steel plates likely withstood the collision, but the rivets holding them together did not. In 1998, the rivet samples recovered from the Titanic were examined by the National Institute of Standard and Technology. The examinations determined that the rivets used on the Titanic were of poor quality. Through the testing, it was discovered that at impact, the rivet heads likely broke off, popped the fasteners from their holes, and allowed water to rush in between the separated steel plates. So the iceberg didn't really cut the Titanic's hull like a knife could cut butter. It was the Titanic's smallest components that didn't withstand the collision. 2.5 hours after the Titanic struck the iceberg, the Titanic's stern rose out of the water, exposing the propellers, and she broke in 2 pieces between the second and third funnels due to the immense forces on the keel. Minutes later, those in the lifeboats saw how the Titanic's stern disappeared in the cold and dark waters of the Atlantic. Till this day, the question remains: what if Murdoch decided to go for a head-on collision with the iceberg? Could the Titanic have survived? In our opinion, it could have, but only if the speed was considerably lower than 22 knots. At 22 knots, after a head-on collision, the amount of structural damage to the hull would have been devastating, and the Titanic might have sunk even faster, leaving no time for the lifeboats to be launched. Lastly, the Titanic was designed to carry 64 lifeboats. That would have been enough to accommodate all passengers of the sinking ship. Yet the Titanic's owner, White Star Line, decided that too many lifeboats would clutter the deck and obscure the first-class passengers' views. So they left Southampton with 20. Who needs lifeboats on an unsinkable ship anyway? This is the story of the Titanic sinking. This is how it was. Alright, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss new episodes.